Rain fell hard that evening, turning the narrow road outside Denver into a slick ribbon of mud and mist. Streetlights flickered weakly against the storm, and most people had hurried home long before the sky broke open. But Ethan Cole wasn't like most people. A single father with a tired face and calloused hands, he was finishing another late delivery shift, his truck loaded with scrap metal for a recycling yard that paid him just enough to keep the lights on. Life had not been kind to him. His wife had passed away years ago, leaving him to raise his 7-year-old son, Jack, on his own. Still, he carried on with quiet determination, never once allowing bitterness to settle where hope could still live. It was just past midnight when Ethan noticed the flicker of hazard lights through the rain. At first, he thought it was an abandoned vehicle, maybe another stranded traveler who had already been picked up. But something in his gut told him to slow down. He pulled to the side of the road, windshield wipers squeaking against the steady drizzle, and squinted through the darkness. The car ahead was tilted slightly into the ditch, and even through the downpour, he could see faint movement inside. He stepped out into the rain, jacket clutched tight against the cold, his boots sinking into the soft earth. As he approached, the weak beam of his flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing a sight that froze him where he stood. Inside the car sat a young woman, pale and trembling, her arms wrapped protectively around two small girls in tattered coats. Their cheeks were streaked with dirt and tears, their lips trembling from the cold. The woman's eyes widened in shock when she saw Ethan's shadow fall across the window. She looked terrified, the kind of fear born from too many broken promises. Ethan held up his hands, speaking through the cracked glass so his voice could be heard over the storm. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help." The woman hesitated, glancing between her children and the stranger standing in the rain. She rolled the window down just a few inches, her voice shaking as she spoke. "Our car broken bar, it stopped working. We've been here since yesterday. My phone died hours ago. I didn't know what to do." Ethan's heart twisted. He could see the fear in her eyes, the exhaustion, the quiet desperation. Without asking further, he ran back to his truck, grabbed a blanket and an old thermos of coffee he'd been saving for himself, and handed them through the window. The girls reached for the blanket eagerly, their tiny fingers brushing against his hand. He saw then just how thin they were, fragile, like petals caught in a storm. "You can't stay here," Ethan said firmly. "It's too cold, and no one's coming this late. Come with me. My place isn't much, but it's warm. You can rest there until the morning." The woman hesitated again, torn between fear and the instinct to protect her daughters. But when one of the twins started to cry softly, she made her choice. With trembling hands, she opened the car door, gathering her children close as they stepped into the rain. Ethan helped them into his truck, turning the heat on full blast. For the first time, he got a good look at Thema. The mother couldn't have been more than 30, her face delicate but weary, her clothes soaked through. The girls were around 5 or 6. Identical in every way except one had a tiny birthmark on her cheek. They huddled together on the seat, shivering but silent, eyes wide with uncertainty. As Ethan drove, the wipers rhythmically beating against the glass, he couldn't help but wonder what their story was. But he didn't ask. Sometimes people just needed safety before they needed questions. When they reached his small rented house, a modest one-story home with peeling paint and a flickering porch light, he guided them inside quickly. The warmth of the heater filled the air, and the girls let out soft sighs as the feeling returned to their fingers. "Sit here," Ethan said gently, motioning toward the couch. "I'll get you some dry clothes. My sons are too small, but they might fit the girls." He disappeared into the next room and returned with towels, blankets, and a pair of old sweaters. He handed them to the mother, who looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You don't even know us," she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan smiled faintly, a quiet, tired smile. "Because someone once did it for me," he said, "and because I'd want someone to do it for my boy if I wasn't around." The woman nodded, her lips trembling. She took the clothes and led her daughters to the bathroom. When they returned, wrapped in warm blankets, Ethan was heating up soup on the stove. The smell filled the small kitchen, and the twins perked up, their eyes following the steam rising from the bowls. "Eat slowly," he told them as he set the table. "It's hot." They obeyed, their tiny hands gripping the spoons as if afraid the food might vanish. The mother, whose name he would later learn was Lena Rivers, watched them eat with tears streaming down her cheeks. It was the first real meal they had in days. Ethan didn't press her for details, but he could see the pain etched into every line of her face. Whatever had led them to that deserted highway had been long and hard. When the children finally fell asleep on the couch, wrapped in borrowed blankets, Lena sat quietly near the window, staring at the rain. Ethan offered her a cup of tea and sat across from her, the silence between them comfortable but heavy. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were trying to get to Ridgeview. I thought maybe Broken Bar, maybe I could find someone there, someone who once helped me." Ethan nodded, though he didn't ask who. He figured everyone had someone they were searching for. But as he looked at Heiress, this tired, grateful stranger who had walked into his life on a stormy night, he felt something stir inside him. It wasn't pity, it was recognition, the quiet sense that maybe, just maybe, fate had crossed their paths for a reason neither could yet understand. When he finally went to bed that night, he checked on the twins one last time. They were fast asleep, their faces peaceful at last. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a kind of calm he hadn't known since his wife's passing. As he turned off the light, he didn't realize that this single act of kindness, pulling over in the rain, opening his door to strangers, would soon rewrite everything he thought he knew about loss, love, and miracles. Because sometimes, the universe doesn't give you what you want when you ask for it. It waits, and when the time is right, it sends you what you need in the most unexpected form imaginable. The next morning broke quietly, sunlight spilling through the curtains like a promise that the storm had passed. Ethan woke early, as he always did, and found Lena already sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. Her daughters were still asleep on the couch, tangled in the blankets he'd given them. She looked different in the daylight, and no longer just a frightened woman from last night, but someone carrying a story she'd been holding in for too long. Ethan offered her a gentle smile and asked if she'd slept at all. She shook her head, her eyes distant. "I kept thinking about how strange it is," she said softly. "The world is full of people, yet somehow we cross paths with the ones who change everything." They spoke quietly while the house stirred awake, their words slow and deliberate, the kind that come when two strangers realize they might not be strangers for long. Lena told him bits and pieces of how she'd been on the road for 2 days, her car breaking down miles from anywhere, her phone dying before she could call for help. But as she talked, Ethan sensed that there was more beneath the surface, something she wasn't ready to say. He didn't push. He'd learned long ago that people open up when they feel safe, not when they're pressed. When the girls woke up, Ethan made pancakes, something he hadn't done in months. Their laughter filled the house, soft and hesitant at first, then bright and real. He caught Lena watching them with an expression that broke his heart. It wasn't just relief, it was the deep, aching gratitude of a mother who had run out of hope and found it again in the most unlikely place. She looked at Ethan with tears gathering in her eyes. "You remind me of someone," she whispered. "Someone I've been searching for." Ethan raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. Lena went on to explain that years ago, when her life had fallen apart, she'd been pregnant and alone. Complications during her delivery had left her in the hospital for weeks, and the bills had been more than she could ever afford. She had no family to turn to, no one to ask for help. But one day, a nurse came in with tears in her eyes and told her that an anonymous donor had paid every cent. There had been no name, only a small note written in neat, careful handwriting: "Someday, when you can, help someone else the way someone helped you." That note had changed her life. She had spent years trying to track down who it came from, not to repay the money, but to thank the person who had saved her and her daughters. Every lead had gone cold. She'd moved to different cities, taken odd jobs, always with the same hope in her heart that one day, she would find the man behind that kindness. And now, sitting in Ethan's kitchen, she felt something she couldn't explain, as if fate had finally guided her to the truth. Ethan listened quietly, his expression unreadable, but inside, a storm of realization began to build. He remembered those hospital bills, how, years ago, after his wife's death, He had started making small donations to families in need through the hospital's anonymous fund. He had never known who received the help he hadn't wanted to. It was his way of honoring his wife, who had died in childbirth because they couldn't afford the best care. He made a promise that no other mother would suffer because of money if he could prevent it. And now, sitting across from him, was one of the women his silent generosity had saved. The coincidence felt too perfect to be random. He looked at Lena's daughters with their curious eyes, their innocent smileless, and something inside him softened. He thought of his own son, of the nights he'd stayed awake wondering if the world still had good left in it. Maybe this was his answer. Maybe the good he had once sent out had found its way back. Lena noticed the change in his face, the quiet recognition, and suddenly it all clicked. She gasped softly, her hand trembling as she looked at him. "It was you," she whispered. "You were the one." Ethan didn't deny it, he only nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of humility and disbelief. "I never expected to meet anyone from back then," he said quietly. "I just did what I could." It wasn't much, but to Lena, it had been everything. She reached across the table and took his hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You saved my family," she said. "You gave my girls a chance to live. I've prayed every day that I'd find you to tell you that because of you, we're here." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was heavy with something unspoken, a sense of destiny that neither could explain. The kindness Ethan had offered years ago, with no expectation of return, had come full circle in the most unexpected way. The mother and children he had once saved in silence had reappeared in his life at the very moment he needed them most. Fate, it seemed, had a way of remembering debts of the heart.